Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is Graham and Kirsty, and we are in for a bit of a challenge. As you see, we are inside. This is our kitchen, so please excuse any extraneous bits that shouldn't be seen. This is the only place that is big enough to put the bike, relatively, that is not outside because it's windy and dusty. Because today we are going to attempt to put the ride wrap frame protection on the bike, and as by magic, Kirsty brings the stuff. So this is it, ride wrap. This is the custom version, so it's going to cover like 96% of the frame, which is quite astounding, and up for a little bit of a challenge with this, because we've got to get into all of the nitty gritty little pieces and all that kind of stuff. So we've got to do some modification first. We've got to try and take as much off the bike as we can to start with. So that means the wheels. We've taken all the mud guards off already. We've taken the bottle cages off, but we are going to have to take the chain off as well. And then there's a couple of decals and things we need to take off before we can actually prepare everything. So we're going to take those off. We're going to wash it down really, really well, so there's no dust, no nothing, and then we can only start. So that's what we're going to be doing. Enjoy. Whew. Okay, that was some tough job getting those wheels off. They were super tight, so we're gonna have to luckily I was trying to change them in here and not on the side of the road, because that would have been interesting. Anyway, carrying on. I guess we're doing the forks first. That looks complicated. And then the back end. Although they did say, I suppose that's to the frame. On reading the instruction, well, not the instruction video, but the help out video, they said to start the back and work forward. But page 1 says the forks, but yeah, I suppose that's different to the frame. So actually we can start either way, it doesn't really matter. Right, so I think we got as clean as we want. We can get it. Alcohol wiped everything, buffed it off again. Now, apparently, the trick is to get everything as wet as possible. Right, so we've got a solution. All right, that's apparently going to float the pieces onto the frame. So we just got to decide where we're going to start, whether it's the back or the front. Wet the sheet as much as we can, and then wet the frame, and then lay them on, and we'll see how hard it is. That's what we're going to do. Right, so we are done. We've just ride wrapped Kirsty's Kona Sutra Limited, and yeah, it was an experience. We've got mine to do next, and I hope it's going to take less time than that because I think it took, well, like 8 I was going to say more like 8 hours. Yeah, it was probably about maybe about 4. I was going to say 6 hours, but yeah, Kirsty says 4 hours, so if we split the difference, 5. So yeah. It took way too long than it should have. Okay, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but once you kind of get the flow of it, then yeah, it gets a little easier. But yeah, prepping it and getting everything back on, especially when you haven't done it before, it's yeah, interesting. So pop a comment down below if you guys use ride wrap, what your experiences are with it, and if you've put on your bike, and otherwise we'll yeah, I'll get mine on, and then we'll get back on the road, hopefully nice and protected, no scratches, no dings, and no wear and tear for all those bags we're going to put on the bike. So right, here we go. This is round 2 of ride wrap. It is my bike's turn to get the treatment, and yeah, hopefully now that we've done Kirsty's, we know kind of what to do. And it'll go a little smoother. So let's get it on the frame, get all the bits off, the wheels off, the chain off, all the other extras, the mud guards, which is more than was before, and we'll get the stuff on.